Welcome to the Glory of God and Kings podcast. I'm your host, Travel Mateus. I'm talking this way because it's very early and I have a loud mouth. Proverbs 25:2 tells us it is the glory of God to conceal a matter, and it is the glory of kings to search it out. That term kings is wider than just the male sex. It involves queens as well. The Bible is a book within which you can immerse yourself to discover more about yourself, and that knows no boundaries. This idea of for the glory of God and kings is simply the ideation that life is deeper and wider and more profoundly rich than what is simply on the surface. Many people might be satisfied to be raking the topsoil to find the nuggets which are there, and that's good. Some people want to find the vein and trace that down to the mother lode, and that's what I'm here for. These episodes that are to follow are revisions and expansions of content that I originally created nearly 10 years ago. And because of that, what you are hearing now reflects my current ideations, my current understanding, and my current relationship with the Bible and with spirituality. I should also say this plainly that I no longer identify with what would traditionally be considered an orthodox Christian framework. My spirituality evolved far beyond the boundaries I once accepted without question. My main mantra now is trust your senses, question your sources, resist consensus. Interestingly enough, my journey away from traditionalism did not begin with just mere hubristic rebellion. It began with a deep dive study. My departure from historical orthodoxy started with what I believed was an innocent deep dive into the doctrine of eternal conscious torment, or what many simply call hell. The deeper I studied, the more the curtain was pulled back and I began to see things that drove me to ask more and more questions. Questions about language, questions about translation, questions about interpretation, questions about what the text was really saying versus what I had inherited others saying about the text. One of the things that I challenge you to think about is, do you have an original thought about something in the Bible that no one's ever said before? Because I have many. And the the inhibition of many people to stretch their wings and take steps in different directions is really due to the pressure of the community. When dogma becomes doctrine, when dogma becomes doctrine, and doctrine regulates spirituality, if anyone is outside of that regulation, it's not a very comfortable place to exist, especially if you don't have the fortitude of character to withstand the pressure. When people say, who do you think you are? But once you begin pulling the thread of the sweater is just, and then there's no more sweater. And then you have all of the yarn or the wool with which to create your own sweater. And that's what I'm here for, to help you pull the thread and then crochet or knit whatever it is you wish to present to the world as what you think about existence, meaning, and being. Despite where my journey eventually led me, I still hold the Bible in very high estimation. In fact, perhaps even more so now than before. It's not a simplistic rule book. It's not a flat historical manual, but it is a profound, layered, symbolic, interconnected body of revelation. And I teach it as a coherent whole, a unified tapestry, one within which I believe the keys to the kingdom are hidden. One of the first things I had to confront was this. The Bible is not a modern novel. It's not written like 21st century instruction manuals either. It's not a perfectly linear narrative where every verse means only exactly what it appears to mean on the surface. Remember Proverbs 25:2. It is the glory of God to hide, and it is the glory of kings to seek. That's the nature of reality. The deeper you dive, the more you discover you have more to discover. And yet, I was taught from a very young age that the surface level, the face value of what each sentence says is the only meaning. There's only one literal meaning, and there's no reason to expound on what could be beyond what is the prima facie reading of the text. But we inherit biases, we inherit assumptions, we inherit dogma that other people thought of. And yet, when we read the Bible sometimes on our own awareness has hiccups or what I call theological speed bumps. We'll get more into that later on, but we are the inheritors of the authorities under which we sit. We inherit frameworks from parents, pastors, traditions, denominations, seminaries, teachers, commentaries, and even the culture itself. Eventually, many people begin reading scripture through lenses they never realize or even known even now that they are wearing. For instance, because Genesis opens with the words, in the beginning, many automatically assume that's where the story begins. That's what it says. But I would like to suggest something a little bit more organic, something that genuinely surprised me. The more I read the middle of the story, the more the middle reshaped my understanding of what started the story and how the story apparently ends. I don't know how that sounds to you. It might sound strange, but for me, that's often how understanding works. Understanding is very chiastic. We'll get into that later. Sometimes the introduction only becomes meaningful after more information is discovered. Sometimes the ending completely transforms what the beginning actually meant. Sometimes symbols introduced early on only become visible once later patterns illuminate them. So instead of approaching scripture like a flat chronological timeline, I began seeing it more like a living, adaptable organism. Themes echoing across pages, symbols repeating themselves, stories mirroring other stories, patterns unfolding in layers. And that realization changed something in me. Because instead of assuming the text was simple, whether the text, I began asking whether the text was intentionally layered. If the Bible were completely plain and self evident in every possible way, my question became, why are there commentaries? Why are there entire schools devoted to theology, hermeneutics, eschatology, biblical language, and textual criticism? Why do scholars spend lifetimes debating passages people claim are just simply obvious? That question led me toward what I would call an apocalyptic approach to Scripture. When most people hear the word apocalyptic, they think of catastrophe, destruction, the end of the world, end times. However, I'd like to suggest something a little more base, a little more foundational, and that is to just simply let apocalypsis mean what it is: revelation, the uncovering, the unveiling, the pulling back of the curtain. And what if that's precisely what Scripture is doing? Not merely providing information, unveiling patterns of human psychosis through symbols, archetypes, and echoes of symbols and archetypes. A single unfolding story expressed through imagery, prophecy, poetry, kingdoms, exile, sacrifice, restoration, dreams, resurrection, transformation, and revelation. What if the Bible were less like a rigid sequence of events? What if it were more multidimensional, like a tapestry revealing humanity, consciousness, suffering, divinity, power, and the relationship between God and man? This brings us to hermeneutics. Hermeneutics is not merely translation, it is the discipline of interpretation. In simple terms, it is not merely asking, what does the text say? But what does the text mean by what it says? And those two things aren't always the same. So throughout this series, I want to explore Scripture differently, not carelessly, not dismissively, but thoughtfully, as an investigator, as a zetetic warrior. Zetetic comes from the Greek word zetao, which means to search out. Searching out pattern by pattern, symbol by symbol, theme by theme, not as someone who stands above the text, but someone who is masticating on it, meditating on it, and allowing that meditation and that mastication to transform you from the inside out. I invite you to think alongside me, challenge me, question me, offer perspectives, because understanding adapts. Understanding evolves, it transforms, it transfigures, it arises from the slough of despond. It rises from the ashes of a crumbling worldview where you once thought one way, but then you think to yourself, if I change the way I think, they are not going to like this. If anyone knew what I was thinking about what he just said in terms of the fact that I think differently, it's very unnerving sometimes. This is episode 1. Opening statements. Welcome to the glory of God and Kings.